Cha-ching, welcome to the HyperGuap podcast. Today we've got an epic impromptu episode. This was unplanned, but due to the recent news that was so timely with Tesla in our portfolio, we thought this would be an awesome time to bring on one of our founders who is in the sweet spot of this issue, which we think is super important, so we'll just dive into it. Tesla was recently booted out of the ESG index, an index that's all about sustainable companies. Exxon and other oil companies remain on this list, and we've known that this sort of thinking of how to invest in sustainable green companies, like the ESG idea has been great, but the systems and like way they implement it's been very flawed. And this was sort of a moment where we all realized that when they kicked Tesla out. And one of our portfolio companies, who we have the founder on now, Zach Stein, good friend of HyperGuap, has actually been building essentially a new version of this ESG index, tackling this problem directly. We invested in them 6 months ago. We've always wanted to do content with Zach, but when we saw this news, we were like, wow, we just got to like have you jump on the podcast immediately and just talk this out because this is really fascinating. Welcome to the show.
Gally, Aiden, so glad to be here. It's an awesome community.
Yeah. And Aiden, do you want to give us a little more context on the situation that what went down and why we, got so interested to call Zach?
Yeah, so the Margaret Dorn, the head of the ESG indices of the S&P kind of 500, said recently, while Tesla may be playing its part in taking fuel-powered cars off the road, it has fallen behind its peers when examined through a wider ESG lens. They claim Tesla has a lack of a low-carbon strategy and codes of business conduct, along with racism and poor working conditions. So in light of these recent news, Zach, I know that you recently had a quote in the Bloomberg where you said the exclusion of Tesla undermines the concept of ESG as a whole. The number one issue in ESG is climate change. Now, electric vehicles are out while Exxon Mobil is in, which is one of the biggest contributors of climate change. Can you elaborate more on this and your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. It is ridiculous that Tesla has been removed from the ESG index. And again, I think undermines that as a whole. We talk with folks who are interested in ESG all the time, and it's to some degree synonymous with sustainable. And when it's sustainable, they really mean climate change. And we know what we have to do to solve climate change. We have to massively scale climate solutions like electric cars. And let's be frank, what you feel about Elon Musk or not, his vision has pushed the entire world years forward in advancing us towards a future that is driven by electric cars than it would be otherwise. Tesla is far leading in this. So it is crazy to have a company whose core business is building a product that is solving our greatest sustainable issue be kept out, versus companies whose core businesses is causing the problem and is completely antithetical from solving it to still remain in.
And it's crazy to me because Tesla also produces their own impact report, which I think they go above and beyond to produce this incredibly detailed report about their own impact on the environment, how they're thinking about it, how to reduce it. Basically, they disrupted ESG themselves with this report. And if you read it, you'll find even that Tesla as a whole has produced way more energy with their products than their electric vehicles even consume. Like, this has been on so many different levels a huge win. So I'm curious, maybe taking a step back, like, who is this like ESG? Like, who is this beast that gets to decide that we have no idea who it is? Like, you know what I mean? Because it seems from our perspective, we're like, what? Like, Tesla got kicked out? Like, who's this anonymous group that has all the power to decide who's doing good in the world, and they're picking all the wrong people?
Totally. So ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. And it is the in vogue way on Wall Street of doing any type of ethical filtering of companies. Before that, you had something called SRI, socially responsible investing. And that was a much simpler version. That was just, let's cut out certain groups, fossil fuels, nuclear, porn, guns, things like that. Really simple. ESG's innovation came about when institutional investors said, hey, ethical risks are actually important to look at when building a portfolio. In the similar way, we want to look at a company's PE ratios or its credit scores. We should be able to account for and balance ethical risks. So it's actually an investment strategy that what ESG came to. And so you had analytics companies, and this is kind of what happens in these decisions, like what happened with Tesla. They're the ones who will go out and do all of this research, where they'll look at a company like Exxon Mobil and rate it on 100 metrics on E, on a scale of 1 to 10, 100 metrics on S, how are they treating their employees and things like that. And then 100 metrics on G, how is their board constructed, is there transparency and things like that. They'll then average all of those scores together into a single E, a single S, and a single G, and then average those three together to give it a single ESG score. So it's trying to take what is very complicated and dilute it into something simple, but it leads to cases like this where you really lose the forest for the trees.
Yeah, and dive into that. How could we get so far off with such that methodology that it seems like the status quo? Like, how does that lead you to such a far off answer where Exxon scores are higher? And like, what is Tesla doing? Just building a massive new factory to like pump out 2 million electric cars that we need? Like, that docked them points? Like, what, like.
This is part of the problem with ESG, is that it is fundamentally not transparent. We actually don't know. Companies like MSCI or Sustainalytics, their entire business model is built on doing those ratings. They don't show you the scores that go into it, or if they do, but you have to pay like 30 grand a year to get a seat in order to see it. That is how they make money. So they're not going to give away the cow for free for it. So they are going to always charge for that. So you're basically in this position of saying, just trust us. So like Vanguard uses MSCI for its ESG funds. And so if you buy a Vanguard ESG fund, Vanguard is saying, hey, we use MSCI, you should just trust them. And you're like, I've never heard of MSCI. So that is just part of the fundamental problem of ESG as a whole, and why you have situations like this, where exactly the points that you're making, where it's very head scratching. This does not make sense. Can come up again and again.
To me, this feels very political. Like, and it feels like it's all about virtue signaling and moving towards this idea of like doing good without, like, if you're not transparent about it, then there's not really impact. So if we're not showing exactly the results that we're doing to make an impact on ESG, then why does it even matter? Then it's just like being on a list and there's no like backbone behind that. So how can we make this more transparent for everyone, make this more like real so that companies actually do work on ESG and are measured in the right way?
Absolutely. And what I think that this comes to is we were all born into an imperfect world. Every company that is on the stock market is not perfect, including Tesla. There are things that need to improve. The question is, who do you want to engage with to improve? And who do you say your business model fundamentally does not work for building a sustainable world? To us, it's a company like Exxon Mobil. Their business model just does not work. It does not make sense to engage with them. Versus a company like Tesla, whose business model we need to scale. And yes, they are not perfect. But that means that we need to work with them to get closer, not shun them in this. So what we need to see a lot more of is seeing, especially from a climate perspective, we know what companies largely have to do. You have to transition to using 100% renewable energy for production. That is a hard thing to do, but we need to see those goals and see that accountability. You need to fully electrify your transportation fleet. Companies like Tesla have to be helpful in that, and you need to be protecting your natural resources instead of abusing them. So those are like that's the broad when we look at climate change. And so there's very specifics that we can see. And the great things that we would like to see is how can we tie those type of goals to things like executive pay and bonuses, where we could give carrots and sticks around that, because that's really concrete and it's really understandable.
Yeah. And it's like one of our mottos, like the bigger the problem, the bigger the opportunity. Like in some ways I give the ESG movement a lot of credit, because this is like the forefront of like thinking about, wait, like Warren Buffett just investing for IRR and capitalism and to make the most money regardless of the business. Like that's a bygone era. And actually one of my hot takes is Warren Buffett's legacy. I'm short his legacy. And I think we'll look back on it as a like horrible era of capitalism where we never thought about the planet or the systems approach. It was just, how can I make the most money? And that's just like horrible. And so I love the idea of ESG, and that's why, but it was so flawed, but we still saw such a big problem of so much pent up capital. And our generation, like literally us, this is solving our problem. We're like, we want to just put our money in this thing that just doesn't support the bad guys. Like, how hard is that? And so that's why I give the ESG movement a lot of credit. And that's where Carbon Collective came in, is we knew it was flawed. We knew, like, for our generation, there still wasn't the green S&P 500. We didn't have confidence or transparency in somebody who could manage our money and do it in a way we trusted to really have our back and think about the climate crisis. And so Carbon Collective, that's the startup you founded that we're invested in, that's the whole mission. And the first time I hit your website, I remember being like, wow, like they're actually really thoughtful about the companies they include in their index. Like they're listing it all transparency. They're telling me what they think. The website's awesome and super to use, like immediate trust. And immediately I felt like I had a friend or hope in this kind of journey of trying to position my portfolio in a way that aligned with my morals. So I'm such a big fan of Carbon Collective and so stoked we got to invest. And I'm curious, like, you can give us your story of how you saw that problem as well and actually created a company and solution to start tackling it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we approached it from two lenses. The first, at a top-down lens, climate change is the issue of our time. Full stop. If we do not solve it, basically every other social and environmental issue is mute, because we will be headed towards a world of unimaginable chaos. The good news is that we have what we need to solve it. We have most of it, and a lot of doing it will make money. It is not altruism or charity that we need to do it. The science is very clear. We need to be investing about 10 to 20 times more per year into climate solutions, things like electric cars, to make the transition to a civilization that runs without fossil fuels. At the same time, we need to completely stop investing in any new fossil fuel expansion. If we are able to do that, we will reach a civilization that runs with zero carbon by 2050 and avoid catastrophic global warming. If we do not, it really is not going to matter how many trees we plant or how much carbon dioxide we suck out of the atmosphere. So that is the playing field that we're in. But what Wall Street broadly labels as sustainable investing is not looking ahead to that future. It is just a less bad version of the world today. It's just removing some of the bad companies. But it's not aligned because we know science is very clear on what to tell us. So that's what we do at Carbon Collective, is we build comprehensive portfolios that make sense for a full retirement account that are investing in building that world. They divest from the companies and industries who are technologically dependent upon fossil fuels, reinvest in the companies building solutions to climate change. This is what Gally likes to call the green S&P 500. We call it our climate solutions collection. And then we broadly hold the remainder of the stock market because these are the companies where we should be using our shareholder advocacy to push them to adopt those climate solutions. And a lot of the time, it's profitable. It is profitable to adopt solar. It is profitable to switch to an electric fleet, even with today's higher prices, because the maintenance costs are so much lower. You can literally drive a Tesla for 1 million miles. You cannot do that with any other type of gas-powered truck today. So that is our theory of change and what we build.
I want to just quickly double in on something that you said there, about this being altruistic, because in my opinion, I think that fighting climate change and investing in these companies, even the most greedy capitalist is going to want to do, but they just haven't had the solutions. Because I think these climate change companies are just going to be better business models. They're going to get cheaper energy. Everything's going to be, it's better science, it's better tech in every regard. So how can we, I feel like there's a misunderstanding that you have to do ESG just for the good, but stay with these old investing. How do we reshape the narrative that, no, you can invest green and it's actually going to be the best investment?
So this is exactly the word that you use, narrative. This is such an important part of how we have impact with investing, because right now we're swimming upstream still. There are two narratives that are holding back that meeting that sustainable investing future. One is that fossil fuels are a necessary evil in a balanced portfolio. That has not been true. I was born in 1989. If you had divested from the S&P 500 of fossil fuels from then until now, even with the rise in energy prices in the last year, you still would have made more money by divesting than holding the S&P 500 as a whole. So fossil fuels have not been a necessary part of a balanced portfolio. And then when we look ahead, it's really hard to see this as an industry that has prospects for growth. Its market share is being eaten up in transportation. 50% of the oil that we use in the US is on our roadways. Electric cars are just a better product, full stop. They're better at getting you from point A to point B. They are faster, they are safer, they are roomier, you can tow more, you can charge your house, and they cost less over time and will cost less upfront within the next 5 years. Fundamentally better technology. It's like going from the horse and buggy to a car. That is the transition that we're in. That's a lot of oil's market share that is being eaten up. Same thing in the electricity sector. Solar, wind, batteries are the cheapest way of making electricity in many places around the world, and that's only going to get more so. So when you look as an investor who's saving for the long term, we're saying yeah, I'm going to retire in 30 years. What should you be invested in? We ask the question is, would you rather be invested in an industry that's fundamentally being outcompeted, or those that are replacing it with those solutions?
It seems kind of like a no-brainer, and I don't want to say it's a conspiracy theory that Tesla got kicked out, but Exxon stayed in, but can we get back to the gossip on that a little bit, or can you tell us what the insight is? Like, how does, because to me it's like I'm literally laughing as you're explaining. I'm like, this is actually like a joke to me. Like it, but people are still taking it seriously, which I guess I should be concerned that this ESG thing. And I think it actually, we were talking before, like I almost feel like it's good that they made such a bold mess up, because this gives me a more, we've been saying the ESG thing is totally whack and BS and needs to be disrupted. And now it's just painstakingly obvious that if you invest in an ESG thing, you're literally going to be holding Exxon, but not Tesla. And that's you investing in the green future. Like,
I think that's a great point, Gally. Just as like this is the perfect transition point. Like this is, it's like in plain sight for everyone to see that this is backwards. Like we need to change to like a real index that's actually measuring climate change. Like let's make it more transparent. Let's show the impact. Which companies are the best? Who's performing the best? This shouldn't be like a black box thing that's behind the scenes. Let's make it so everyone can see the cards on the table and who's performing the best environmentally.
Absolutely. I could not agree more with that. Yeah, when we look at like what happened now with Tesla, to get back to your question, Gally, just some speculation. I think if Elon Musk was a personality that was more similar to like a Tim Cook or someone who would be like more reserved and not be himself in that regard, I imagine Tesla would probably still be on the ESG index. Like that is, he is just such a polarizing figure in himself, which for better or for worse, you know, Tesla would not be the company it is today. GM and Ford would not be pushing to an all-electric future the way that they are today without Tesla. Like, he has fundamentally changed the world, and Elon Musk, in this regard, has fundamentally accelerated us down a path towards a climate-stable future because of his visionary and, frankly, his stubborn insistence and being dickishness at times with it. That has had a major impact.
Relentless perseverance is another way to put it, maybe. But yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, his kind of bold, and it's so ironic that there's 100 metrics. There's all this science that we have to look at to be in the climate index. And then if I candidly ask you why they kicked Tesla out, it's because like, well, they didn't like the CEO's personality. It's like, well, guess what? It shouldn't be about whose feelings are hurt or who doesn't like Elon Musk tweets. It's about science. What happened to the facts? What happened to like us being on team climate change? Like, I don't care. Like feelings we can talk about that tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like this is like real work. So,
and to be clear, like Tesla has things to improve. Like Tesla is not a perfect company because no company is a perfect company. We were born into an imperfect world, and so it doesn't mean we should stop engaging with them.
But I think it's so. I kind of push back against that because I say yes, Tesla can improve. Every company can improve, but Tesla's leading the pack by so far when it comes to the true ESG thing. Like. And I think Ford and other companies are starting to try and copy this impact report thing Tesla's doing. But when the first time I saw that, I was like floored. I was blown away. Like the amount of in-depth research of, first of all, what are you talking about? Transparency, being open-minded. They're like, this is, if you fully charge it with a coal-powered grid, this is the total lifetime thing of your Model 3 versus a gas car, but this is how we're going to more solar. This is why. This is how we're going to think about our water usage at Berlin. This is how we're thinking about adding solar panels to the top of the factory. Like the most transparent in-depth thing that is so far ahead. You know, I look at this constantly of all the auto companies, of all the electric companies, of companies like Starbucks. Like, I think this is whack too. Like, we should be docking Starbucks. Like, if Starbucks in the ESG index, no way. Starbucks is known for pumping out like 100 billion of these things every year and ruining the planet with them. I'm part of the problem too, but I'm just saying, like, I don't think they're really helping. So, to me, it's a little bit frustrating that Tesla got kicked out when I really want people to take notice that Tesla's leading in this. And I wish every company would publish an impact report the way Tesla's did and want to triple down on giving them and like Martin and Elon kudos and investing their very limited resources and very limited time into creating a transparent report about we're trying our best. Here's our roadmap to continue trying our best and how we're going to do that. So I'm trying to figure out a bridge of how we can get legislation to force every company to do what Tesla did, not penalize them for when they're really like, it's just, I'm trying to figure out how companies like Carbon Collective, maybe, I mean, I think us doing this podcast and it made me so happy to see you on Bloomberg. Like, you're a portfolio company. We've been skiing out this for 6 months, that they have this horrible thing come out. And I'm like, Zach's in there with an awesome quote, like just bringing some rationalness to this conversation. But I'm curious, how do we go forward from here? What's the path forward to really solving this? Because right now, like Aiden said, like we're at a turning point. Maybe this is great, but at some point it's kind of heartbreaking that Tesla got, kicked out.
Yeah. So we are in the middle of the backlash to ESG. Those in kind of like in the like financial circles or those who write about sustainable investing, it's probably been going on for about a year, and it's starting. This is like such that the wave is like zoomed up with this. And kind of in the critiques, I was talking with a Bloomberg reporter, that one who I was commented with, and I think there's going to be a lot more of this type of very deep look at saying, okay, what's actually in here and what are we actually working towards with it? So I think, again, this is where that narrative shift, what we like to say at Carbon Collective is the world only changes, the status quo only changes when enough individuals decide to change it. There's not a different way of changing the world that we've seen. People like to say it's like climate change is the government's fault or it's corporations' fault. Okay, but how do you change governments or how do you change corporations? It's our collection of coming together. So we are trying to change that narrative. And I think a lot of that is when we look at investing, we look at things like efficient market hypothesis of how that is influencing stocks. But what we don't account as publicly available information is those underlying narratives that we all just kind of adopt and hold, like fossil fuels are a smart investment. It is this type of pushback in being really clear and having a message around this that I think is some of the best ways that we can start pushing that narrative forward into what we need to build. At Carbon Collective, our solution for that is saying, let's look at climate change and try to break down what is a really complicated world into that simple 3 parts. Whose business models are antithetical, who are building the solutions, and whose business models aren't great but can work, and how do we get them to use the solutions instead?
And do it in a transparent way. And to me, what's so exciting about what's happening right now is Gally always says the biggest problems are the biggest opportunities. And right now, we have a massive problem with allocating capital in this S&P ESG index that really isn't having that big of an impact on solving climate change. And now we have a massive opportunity to create new solutions. This is an opportunity to say this is an antiquated system. How can we restructure this with more transparency, more impact, get more people involved, and not create this black box thing? How would we structure this in the future? What does that look like when everyone comes together? How can we get more people to be involved in the process, make it more transparent, see the impact?
I'll get to your question in one sec. Let me give a theory of mine when it comes to the divestment movement from fossil fuels. This movement works when capital starts saying, I'm going to make more money that way. That is that narrative shift of when we say that fossil fuels as an industry are fundamentally not something that makes sense to invest in. I'll give an example of that. The U.S. coal index fell, and the Dow Jones U.S. coal index fell 99% from 2011 to 2020. 99%. And it's not because we stopped using coal. We unfortunately still used plenty of it. It is because the narrative changed. It changed from being a smart way to generate high dividends for a portfolio to being, this is an industry that has no long-term future. So get out while you can.
Yeah.
How much harder is it for a coal company to go out and get a loan or sell more capital when their share price just fell 99%? It's really hard. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy with that. So I think that is so much of what we need to do is those of us who are saying, are real ethical problems that we need to solve here. The more that we can then push the narrative of saying, and capital, C capital, you are going to make more money by adopting this and this type of strategy. That is when I think we start to see the tipping point of what we need to do.
And I also think it's why I'm so hyped to have you on and have done this show is HyperGuap, us and working with Carbon Collective. It gives me so much, so stoked of wow, this is a focus group of really smart, young, hungry people who want to tackle this problem. And those are the businesses we're going to fund. And I feel like this is a wedge into having such a big impact of these trillions of dollars of capital and building solutions to funnel them to the right reasons. I'm this is really big concept and so exciting. And is just exactly the kind of thing that makes me pumped about HyperGuap. The government kind of should be doing this. We all know we need it. It's not happening, and we're jumping in and pushing it forward. And so I've just been very stoked to be part of the Carbon Collective team and be backing you. And I think everyone should go check out the Carbon Collective website for sure. Check out your solutions, see your thought process. And I know you have so much cooking behind the scenes and are just constantly thinking about this problem. And that makes me super optimistic. So I just want to say thank you for that.
Gally, thank you so much for having me and for investing in us and being a partner with this. We are just so honored by the work you're doing. We are just in the same boat rowing together on this. I will say broadly, maybe I'll leave us with this. This is a point that our head of strategy and marketing has said before, is that we've seen major turning points in investing. We saw it with Warren Buffett. We saw it with John Bogle. And they've happened about 30 to 40 years apart. And we're about 30 to 40 years since what happened with John Bogle. Our theory is that the next one is the redefinition of sustainable investing. And it is groups like ours, collectively, that will be the ones that are responsible for reimagining what that is, and then helping push that forward and lead, so that those who are using ESG today will eventually say, oh, we need to be copying and adopting this way.
Wow. I love the way you paint that arc of the way people will care. I just see it so, like, you talk to anybody that's our age, it's like they'll tell you the same thing. It's coming. It's just, yeah. Any final thoughts, Eden?
I think this is just going to open up the floodgates. I mean, tools are just a way for us to do more, and Carbon Collective is a tool to divest from these old industries and move into to the new ones. And so now we finally have the tools to be able to do that, and I think it's really exciting.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Zach. I can't wait to have you on and just follow what Carbon Collective's up to. But yeah, really appreciate the time and the impromptu podcast.
So honored to be here. Reach out anytime.
Woo.
Awesome. Take care.
All right. See you guys.
Peace.